We usually talk about two parts of the tradition, the written and the oral. I want to describe to you a third part, which is not written and not oral. The written and the oral have in common that they are both in words, sentences, paragraphs, chapters, books. They're both in language. They can be written and spoken. The third part is not in language. It's not in words. Probably can't be put into words in any practical way. I used to say that it couldn't be put into words theoretically. Then a student pointed out that my proof was not correct, so I've taken that back. But certainly in no practical way. It's, as far as we are concerned, in terms of our dealing with it, living with it, interacting with it, it's beyond language altogether. Now, what I want to do is, first of all, show you some traditional sources which indicate that there is such a thing. Then second, what the status of such a thing is. If it's not in words, what is it? Could it be right or wrong, true or false, factual? Is it just emotion? And then third, I want to talk about where exactly it's found, Jewishly, and how we can deal with it and interact with it. So, first step is Jewish sources that show that there is such a thing. There's a verse in Devarim Vav, chapter 6 of Deuteronomy, I think it's verse 14, where it says, "You shall do what is straight and good in Hashem's eyes." B'sisa yashar atov b'nei Hashem. You shall do what is straight and good in God's eyes. The Ramban asks, at least implicitly, what is this? We have 613 commandments. Is this the 614th commandment? In addition to the other 613, there's another one, do what is straight and good. Does it sum up the other ones? If you do all the other things that I told you, then automatically it's straight and good. What is the status of this statement? What is it doing? The Ramban says something pretty radical, pretty surprising. He says, this verse is talking about interpersonal relations. Person to person, group, community, society, the nation. And he says it is impossible to write down a full list of rules for interpersonal relations. It's impossible to do that. Now let's just stop and take account here. He's writing a commentary on a verse in the Torah. Who's the author of the Torah? God. God dictated it to Moses letter by letter. So if the Ramban writes it's impossible to write down an entire list of rules, is he saying that God couldn't write down a complete list of rules? Sounds like it. I take it what he means is that maybe there is a complete list of rules, but it would have 2 million rules. And we would never be able to read it, understand it, and apply it. For us, human beings, there's no way to tell us what's expected of us in interpersonal relations by writing down a list of rules. So the Ramban says the Torah, meaning HaKadosh Baruch Hu, took a two-part approach. First of all, he wrote down a number of rules. Those rules are precise and focused, described, stealing, murder, applying justice, charity, and so forth and so on. But then he said, don't be satisfied just with the explicit rules I gave you. Don't be satisfied. Set yourself to go beyond the rules I gave you to do also what is straight and good in God's eyes. When the reader reads that, he thinks, but how am I supposed to do that? You're not telling me what you want, and then you say, do what I want, even though I don't tell you. I mean, how am I supposed to do that? Where am I supposed to get that from? There's another verse in Leviticus, Vayikra, where the Torah says, Kedoshim Tihiyu, be holy. And the Ramban says the same thing over again, and he links the two discussions, cross-references them. But this time with respect to personal behavior, not interpersonal with other people, just personal behavior. Ramban says it's impossible to write down a complete list of rules to tell you how you should live as a human being. So the Torah has two levels. First of all, it gives you a number of specific rules. I bet it says, don't be content with that. Don't be satisfied with that. But set yourself to go beyond the explicit rules I gave you so as to live a life of holiness. And he makes a remark which has become famous in our literature. It is possible to be a naval b'rshus Torah. It's possible to be a degraded, disgusting personality fully within the Torah's rules. So, for example, we have rules of kashrus. Meat to be kosher, wine to be kosher. Where does it say how much meat and how much wine to eat per meal? Where does it say that? Where's that written? Nowhere. So Ramban says you can fulfill all the laws of kashrus and eat and drink yourself into a stupor where you can't think anymore. Where is it written? There's a limit on that. Here he says, because that's not holy. It doesn't express holiness. That expresses the life of an animal. So twice the Ramban says the Torah doesn't give you a full list of rules. It gives you some rules as examples, and then you have to go beyond those rules. And the question is, how do you do that? How do you do that? Where do you get the way to do that? A third source is the Mesilas Yesharim, the Path of the Just, by Luzzatto. Chapter 18, he describes what is a chassid, as opposed to what is a tzaddik. Tzaddik is a person righteous. Chassid is a person who goes beyond being righteous. A chassid is a person who says, my whole life is dedicated to pleasing God, and that includes pleasing Him even in ways that He didn't command. He says that explicitly, going beyond all the official rules. But how am I supposed to know what will please God if there aren't rules to tell you what He wants? We don't encourage making things up. Flying by the seat of your pants, intuition, guessing, dreams. That's not a Jewish approach. But then what are you supposed to do when we're being told explicitly to go beyond what the explicit rules tell us? A fourth source, many times in the Talmud has to decide on a course of action, or later commentators decide on a course of action. And the situation is complex, because if I do A, certain Jewish mitzvos and values will be strengthened and others will be weakened. If I do B, it'll be a different group will be strengthened and weakened. How do I make a bottom line evaluation? I'll give you a simple example. When Rosh Hashanah comes out on Shabbos, we don't blow the shofar. Why not? The Torah says explicitly, blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, even on Shabbos. The Rabbi said no. Why? Because if you blow the shofar on Shabbos, on Rosh Hashanah, you might be worried that you didn't blow it correctly, or a shofar isn't valid, and you might run to find a rabbi who can tell you whether you did it right or not, and you could carry the shofar through a public domain, and that will be violating Shabbos. So, because of the possibility that a small number of people will by accident violate Shabbos, the rabbi said no one should blow shofar that year. They're Isa. How did they make that evaluation? Who told them what's more important? There's no rule in the literature, no Mishnah that says which one is more important. They had to sum it up in their minds and say, well, blowing shofar for the whole nation versus the risk of violating Shabbos by a few people, protecting Shabbos is more important. And they did that. There are many such decisions that had to be made. Again, this is not made by flipping a coin. It's not made by, reading tea leaves. They thought about it, they evaluated it, and they came to a joint decision that this is what should be done. So again, there seems to be some way of deciding what to do, deciding what's correct, that goes above and beyond what we have in the written rules. Where does that come from? What is it? I'm just proving to you there's something there that isn't written down. That's all. Now, I lived through some revolutions in philosophy and psychology, physics. One of the things I lived through when I was undergraduate about 100 years ago, I was really in the 60s, early 60s, there was a thought that all thinking is in words. All thinking is in words. We used to be taught if you can't say it, you can't think it. Thinking is putting words together. That's what thinking is. Having a thought means having words. That's dreadfully wrong. It's dreadfully wrong. And in the coming decades, they came to realize that it is dreadfully wrong, that a great deal of thought is not in words. Here are some of the considerations, just to make them some easy considerations, to show you the status of thinking not in words. Did you ever have the experience of trying to put something into words? Look in a cloud formation, talk to him on the phone. What does it look like? What does it look like? How can I tell you? Well, it looks a little bit like a seashore with horses running across it, or something like that. Or, what does it look like? Let me think for a while. You're looking at it. You see it. You know what its shape is, but you don't have the words for it. And then you may find the words. Searching for words. How did it feel when he said that to you? How did it feel? So you sort of pull up the feeling from your memory. You're feeling the feeling. What word should I use? And then you say, well, it was a kind of mixture of fear and awe and privilege. It was those three elements pushed together. But it may take you time to find the words. Now, it can't be that you have no thought until you have words, because what were you trying to find words for? Somebody says to you, was it irritation? No, that wasn't what it was. How do you know that wasn't what it was? How do you know that's the wrong word? If you have no thought, if you're going to have an idea in your mind, how can you disqualify a word and say it's wrong? Obviously, you have a thought, you have an idea, there's something in front of you, and you're looking for words to fit it. A friend of mine has been working at the Applied Physics Laboratory of Johns Hopkins University forever. Well, they built satellites and ballistic systems and armaments for submarines and things like that. And he told me at one time they had a problem that on a sonar scope, certain schools of fish look like enemy submarines. And that's not good, because if you fire a torpedo at a school of fish, you're wasting a torpedo. So it was important to figure out which is which. There were two people in the Navy who could reliably tell. They look at the sonar screen, they see the figure, and they could say, no, that's a submarine, that's fish. And then one died. So I said, why don't they ask them to describe what the difference is? He said, the Navy thought of that. They're not so dumb. They thought of that. They said to him, what's the difference between the ones that look like fish and the ones that look like submarines? And they said, well, the ones that look like fish. And the ones that look like submarines look like submarines. They just look different. We see a difference. And this is objective, because you could test them. Show them slide after slide, and they get it right every time. They just couldn't put it into words. Math, what mathematicians do is they try to prove things. You have axioms, you try to prove something's true or false. How do they search for a proof? Do they have hidden away in the safe in the back room a secret book of rules that says, here's how you find proofs? No. And in fact, we know from certain fundamental theorems proved in the middle of the 20th century, it's impossible to have such a book of rules. Mathematicians look at it and think and let things hit them until an idea comes up on the screen. The idea comes up, they bat it around for a while, see whether it's worthwhile. If it's not worthwhile, they cancel that screen and go back to looking at it and hoping something happens. Some mathematicians are very gifted. They look at the thing and they think about it, and something comes up on the screen. And others don't, and they don't become mathematicians. They become cooks or bus drivers. Or either you have it or you don't. The process of looking for a proof is what we call intuitive. So to play with it and see if something happens. Creativity is like that generally. Same thing in science. You have a theory, you get experiments which contradict the theory. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to think about it until something happens. Now, in all these cases, what's going on isn't put in words, but it's objective thought. The reason it's objective thought is because you can check. You can check whether they get it right or wrong. When those guys said, this is a submarine, this is a school of fish, the people showing them the pictures know what the picture was taken of, and they know that they got it right. These mathematicians sit around and they come up with theorems. That's why they're employed as mathematicians, because they regularly prove things. Same is true with empirical scientists. When they have trouble with a theory, they sit and try to think of an alternative. But when they think of an alternative and then they test it, very often it tests correct. So we know there's something about grasping the world that goes beyond words. And it's very important. It's crucial. A lot of progress is made by using that kind of thinking. So when we say that this piece of Torah is not put in words, not expressed in words, one should not therefore say, well, it's only second class, it's not objective, it's just feeling, it's poetry, it has nothing to do with the real world. On the contrary. On the contrary. This applies, let's say, in psychology. You look at a person and you wonder, what is his mood? What is he feeling? There are people who can take a look at him and tell you exactly what he's feeling. Other people, it's a blank. Person who takes a look reads body language. Often, that's a gift. You just learn somehow what other people don't learn. You look at the person and you can tell what he's feeling. Sometimes they can tell you, this is what he's feeling and this is what he needs. Do this and you'll see. He'll feel better, or this and this will happen. They make predictions. How do you test any idea? You ask for predictions and you test it. And they're right. You deal with the person in the way that you were told, and then the person reacts in the way that was predicted. Then you know these people know something about the world that the others don't know. So when I say that it's beyond language, that should not be taken to downgrade it at all. It's just a part of how we know the world. By the way, this is reflected even in halacha. Let's say you're a judge, and you're dealing with a case, and there's evidence. Some witnesses come and they say they saw this and this and this, and you question them and cross-examine them. They pass all the tests, but something bothers you. Something bothers you. It just doesn't feel right. What do? You say, well, but there are rules. The tradition has rules. Ask these questions, get these answers, see if there are contradictions. I followed all the rules. The law is, if you don't feel confident that it's right, disqualify yourself. Don't render a decision. In other words, trust your intuition. To that extent, if it doesn't feel right, then there's something wrong, and disqualify yourself. Don't just say, well, that's just feelings and just throw it away. No, because there's a way of grasping what's going on that's beyond the rules, beyond the words, beyond the formulas. And that also has validity. And that also contributes to the way you make a decision. Okay, now, if all of this is correct, where does it come from? Where does the non-linguistic part of the tradition come from? Now here it's an opportunity to make a gigantic mistake. Gigantic, dangerous mistake. Well, God created me and He gave me a soul. And that soul has a natural connection with divinity, with what's holy, with what's true, with the Torah. And when the feelings well up inside me, that's God communicating with me. And that's where this non-linguistic understanding comes from. That's absolutely incorrect. We're not promoting subjectivity here. It's absolutely incorrect. And by the way, there's a whole religion based on that idea, and that's Protestant Christianity. Everyone has his own private revelations, and something appeals to you, and it feels very deep, and feels very positive, so that's true. There's no echo of that in Torah. The source of this understanding is in prophecy. It's in prophecy. Just like the source of the linguistic tradition is in prophecy, the Chumash comes from Moses, the other prophets, the writings come from prophecy and divine inspiration. This also comes from prophecy. Because, as the Ramban says, and the Kuzri says, and the Rambam says, and others, prophecy is a total experience. Prophecy isn't like getting a postcard in the mail. Dear so-and-so, ABC, signed God. Prophecy is a total experience. So much so that this is recorded in a famous verse. Prophet Samuel comes to Saul. And he says to him, I want you to go on a trip, and on the way you will meet some disciples of the prophets. You too will prophesy. You'll be overturned into another person. When someone has prophecy, he becomes another person. It has an impact on him as a whole person, not just words that he remembers. So much so that aside from Moses, when someone had prophecy, he was flattened on the ground. He lost control of his muscles, lost control of his mind, lost control of his perceptions, lost control of his emotions. It was a totally overwhelming experience. When he came out of prophecy, he was a different person. He was a different person. The prophecy left an imprint in him. And that difference in who he was showed in the way he acted, the way he interacted with people, the way he lived his life. So much so that when the tradition describes why Joshua took over from Moses, why did Joshua take over from Moses? The answer is because Joshua was Moses' servant, Meshares Moshe. He never was absent from his tent. If you look at the first verse in the book of Joshua, that's what it says, and the Gaon of Vilna's commentary there. He served him so that he wasn't content with Moses' lectures. He wanted to absorb as much of Moses, the person, as possible. So he attended him. He washed his hands. He served his meals. He was with him day and night. And that's why he was chosen to be the second leader of the Jewish people, because he had more of Moses than anybody else. Because part of who Moses is shows in what he does. And what Moses is the supreme prophet. There was no prophet greater than Moses, or as great as Moses, not before and not since. Now, since the time of the Exodus, the Jewish people had 1,200,000 prophets. 600,000 men and 600,000 women. Prophecy was very common. For 1,000 years, prophecy was very common. Every Jew lived with prophets. Every Jew spoke to prophets, interacted with prophets. And that means, because they were prophets, the way they interacted with people showed this residue, this leftover, this remainder of what prophecy does for a person, what that prophecy does to a person. That's the source of the non-linguistic part of the Torah. It came from an experience. It expresses itself in behavior and becomes available to other people to experience. That's where it is, and that's how it's communicated. It comes from God, just like the linguistic comes from God. The whole of our tradition comes from God, doesn't come from anyplace else. It certainly doesn't come from inner intuitions. That's not where the tradition comes from. It comes from a divine injection into the world, and that's what its origin is. Now, if that's what its origin is, and if that's what it is, it's something which isn't put into words, how do you learn it? Well, you can't learn it through lectures or books. It can't be put into words. You learn it by interacting with the people who have it. And this will depend upon a person's preparation for this, or his natural talent for this. What is this like? This is like advanced sports. You're throwing a ball. You want to be a quarterback, and you're throwing the football, and the coach says, "Don't throw it like that. Throw it like this," and he shows you. He doesn't say use the four fingers more tightly, spread the fingers more, and so forth and so on. He shows you. You look at him, and either you get it or you don't. If you don't get it, then you go play chess. You don't play football. You watch what's done, and then you grasp by watching what the dynamics are, what the crucial features are, and then if you have the coordination to implement it, you learn. All of this non-linguistic learning is like that. I dealt in philosophy. I took a couple of courses with a very eminent professor, and he would throw out problems for us. Then we would work on them, and then we would give him our answers, and he would show them why they're wrong, and then he would tell us his answer. And sometimes people asked him, "Well, how did you come up with that answer?" He said, "I thought about it." Thanks a lot. That's really helpful. And sometimes he would say, "Well, I thought this and then this, but how did you start with this, and why did you move to that?" I don't know. So he tells you, and either you get it or you don't. I played a musical instrument, and I performed classical music many times. There's such a thing as musicianship. You can get all the notes right, and the music is awful. It's just mechanical. Musicianship means give it feeling. How do you do that? I'll show you what it means. There's a famous line in Shakespeare, to be or not to be, that is the question. Right? Now, suppose somebody said, "Oh, I know how to read that. To be or not to be, that is the question." Don't be an actor, because you didn't give it any meaning. But I said every word. I said all the words in order. I pronounced them clearly. No one had any question what I said. Yeah, but you didn't communicate anything. You didn't say anything. You didn't give it a meaning. So you hear Charlton Heston or some other great actor reading the words, and all of a sudden they come alive. They communicate the whole thought, the whole attitude. How do you learn to read like that? You listen to great people learn to read. You listen to great people read like that, and either you get it or you don't. There are no rules for reading. Pause here, emphasize that word. And the same thing's true in music. You're playing music. Where are the phrases? Are they 4 bars, 8 bars, 16 bars? Should you put the 16 bars together or break it up into 2 8 bars? Well, play it, hear it, and sing it, breathe it, and it'll come. If you're gifted, if you have this talent, it'll come out making sense. Different performers do it in different ways. That's why different performers can perform the same piece of music, and it says different things when they perform. There's always room for new nuance, new way of expressing things. At any rate, the way this is communicated is through experiencing those who have it. That's why personal contact is so important. It's important, in general, watch a person, be present when someone prays, or when he interacts with people, or when he's making a difficult decision, or when he's under stress. I watched someone, I will never forget this, it was in Boston. It was morning davening, chakras. After chakras, my Rabbi was there, I was there, and someone whom we both knew well came up to my Rabbi and started yelling at him, yelling and screaming at him. I was horrified. So I put myself in between them, facing the other guy, and I walked at him and just forced him out the door. I turned back. The Rebbe was perfectly calm. Perfectly calm. I said to him, how can you be so calm? He said, when he started to yell, I started to think about what's going on at home and what he's facing. All I felt was pity that poor fellow is dealing with those problems. I thought, gee, I wouldn't have reacted that way. But I saw it. No, that was like an emblem for me. So this is possible. It's possible for a human being to respond like that. Maybe I could find resources in myself to move somewhat in that direction. This is something you absorb by interacting with these people. And that includes learning. When you interact with the person learning, and he faces a problem, and he deals with the problem, has an answer, then the answer doesn't work, and then he goes back. So you see how he takes it, how he deals with it. I don't know if you know what Tosfos is, but someone asked Rosh Salanter, how will I have only a certain amount of time to learn. I can learn Gemara with Rashi's commentary, but that's all. And he said, is that okay? Should I do that? Rosh Salanter is supposed to have said, I don't know the source of the story, he's supposed to have said, you're not going to learn Tosfos? How will you learn Yiras Shamayim? How will you learn fear and awe of heaven? So I thought, what? What has Tosfos got to do with fear and awe of heaven? And I thought, the approach of Tosfos commentary is to take whatever is said on this page and look up every other place in the entire Talmud and work hard to make sense out of all of it. What pushes someone to make that kind of effort, to take that kind of responsibility, is because this has to be understood. It has to be, and it has to be globally understood. And everything in the end has to make sense. Or at least you register where you can't make sense out of it. So then you learn awe of heaven from the way Tosfos attacked learning. That's the way in which this material, this part of the tradition is communicated. It's learned from interaction with the people who have it, just like the other non-linguistic elements of human life. The last point that I want to make is how are the two parts related to one another? This is crucial, and it's not at all immediately obvious. You have the linguistic, which is written in the oral on one side, and you have the non-linguistic on the other side. How are they related to one another? Is it just they're two parts of the tradition, and I guess to get all of it, you'd have to get both of them, because otherwise something would be missing. Sort of like sports and Chinese history. Sports is a study, Chinese history is a study. If you left one of them out, you don't know everything, but you wouldn't expect your study of Chinese history to affect the way you understand sport, nor vice versa. It's not like that at all. In truth, you can't have one without the other. Or you can't have a deep grasp of one without a deep grasp of the other. They are interdependent. I want to show you that in both directions. Imagine a person who says, I'm into virtue. I'm into sainthood. And I'm going from culture to culture, and I'm watching people and seeing, how they live, how they act, how they deal with people, how they deal with problems. I want to understand what it means to be a saint. And imagine that person observing great Jews. Yes, people who are great, revered Jews, and goes to observe them. I think he inevitably is going to get wrong impressions. For example, this is an incident that took place once upon a time. A woman came into, I don't know if I told you this story, I told some other share recently. A woman came in on a Friday morning to the rabbi with a chicken, a dead slaughtered chicken. And she was concerned that maybe the chicken was not kosher. The rabbi happened to be teaching his students at the time. So he said to her, I understand you have a problem with the chicken. Please wait until I finish the class this year. So I go, fine. She's sitting there. An hour goes by, an hour and a half goes by. She says to the rabbi, look, it's getting late. And if there's a problem with the chicken, it's going to be hard for me to get a chicken in the market. So I really need you to look at the chicken now. So he says, oh, you want me to look at the chicken now? Okay. And he looks at the chicken and says, it's kosher. Thank you very much. It goes on. The students say to the rabbi, what happened here? You never did that before. You kept her waiting an hour and a half. She was worried. The rabbi said, when she walked in, I could immediately see there was a problem with the chicken. It's a problem about which the authorities are split. Some say it's kosher, some say it's treif. And the overall policy is, if it's going to cost a lot of money and effort, then you can say it's kosher. But if it can be easily replaced, then you have to say it's treif. Okay, this woman is a poor woman. If I gave her a decision at the beginning, the market was open for another 2 hours, she can easily get another chicken, I would have to say that it's treif. She'd have to go and borrow the money. It would be a hardship to her. I waited till the market was closing. It would be very difficult to find another chicken. Now, because it's very difficult, I could rule leniently and say that it's kosher. That's why he did it. Now imagine this saint collector watching this. The woman comes in, wait, hour and a half, she's in distress. She asks, he finally gives her an answer, and she goes out. He's going to say, that's being a saint? I don't think so. I think that's being cruel. I don't think that he did anything nice. In order to understand the actions of a person when he's living a tradition, you have to know the rules of the tradition. If you don't know the rules of the tradition, you don't know what he's doing. It's like watching two people playing chess without knowing the rules. Was that a good move or not? I don't know. Maybe they're setting up a Japanese rock garden. What are they doing with these pieces here? They're just, moving them around. I don't know if it's a good move or not. If you don't know the linguistic, if you don't know the rules that they're operating with, you're not going to be able to understand the great actions of people, the sainthood of people. On the other hand, if you don't have access to the experiential, you can't understand the rules either. I'll tell you an incident that I was told by the person it happened to many years ago. There was a young woman who was a student in a university in the Boston area, came from a non-religious home, didn't know any religious Jews, she was Jewish. Somehow she got hold of Diane Grunfeld's book, The Sabbath. Diane Grunfeld in that book goes through the 39 malachos, the 39 forbidden activities on Shabbos. She read through it, and she told me when she read it, her reaction was horror. Look at all the things you can't do. You can't take a shower. You can't answer or make a phone call. You can't open your mail. You can't write a letter. You can't cook your breakfast. You can't carry things outside. She said, she was sure that living Shabbos would be just waiting for the next mistake, sort of neurotic sense of, when am I going to trip? It took her months to get up her courage to keep her first Shabbos. Now she's all alone. There's a totally negative Shabbos. No Shabbos songs and communal meals and davening with songs and Torah study. Just negative. But she got up her courage and she did it. And the result was that she didn't feel neurotic. She felt relief. She said, I realized how much of my life is based on interruptions. taking telephone calls and answering letters and various chores that have to be done, with this one now, another one at 10 o'clock, at 10:30 I have to be there, and so forth and so on. She said, I had a 24-hour period where I could stop and think, where am I? Where am I going? What am I trying to achieve? Who am I exactly? She said she found it to be a precious experience. And then, and here's the point of the story, she said, I went back and reread the book. She now read the book in the light of an entirely different experience. These are rules for protecting something precious in life. That's not just an obsessive compulsive text forcing you to live up to a myriad of difficult rules. It's creating something that's precious. Now, a great deal of understanding the Torah is experiential. You cannot create for a person the feeling of Shabbos by describing the laws of Shabbos, even reading through the songs of Shabbos. If the person doesn't experience it, especially experience it with a family, see the interaction between parents and children, or the parents with one another, go to davening and see how the davening is conducted, see the children there. You have no idea what Shabbos is. And the same is true with many, many aspects of Jewish life. Of course, a Pesach Seder, the holidays in general, Sukkot, especially Simchas Torah, the dancing, the singing, the celebrating, a funeral, when someone great passes on. And they have funerals, and here the funerals have tens of thousands of people, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people. The whole yeshiva goes. There is an impression. You come to this yeshiva and sit here on this little hill, and you study, you think, okay, so there are about 300 or 400 people, and that's it. Go out, you see the streets black with people, as far as the eye can see, in both directions. And you know, around the corner there's another black sea, and around that corner there's another black sea. You realize you're part of a big community. It's not one little corner over here. That's an important thing to realize. It's an important thing to experience. So, when you do that, and then you come back to read about the lives of the patriarchs and the matriarchs and the prophets and the Talmud and the rest, it's experienced in an entirely different way. The linguistic and the non-linguistic are interdependent. They're intertwined with one another. And I think this observation is a critique of at least the Jewish study programs that I'm aware of. Now, I don't know all the ones in the United States or other countries. But if you have a Jewish studies program that's only books and lectures, then it is crippled. If it doesn't have programmed Jewish experiences, then it's crippled. And if somebody says, yeah, but look, if I take someone to a Shabbos experience or to a holiday experience, isn't that sort of like doing religion? But then, isn't Judaism religion? And why would that be wrong? In psychology and anthropology, you have field trips. Why can't you have Jewish field trips? Okay, leave that for the academics to sort out. I'm just pointing out that intellectually, it's deficient, because if you don't have the experiences, you cannot possibly understand the written and the oral, the linguistic part. That's why it's crucial. If someone's experimenting with Jewish life, it's not enough to come to yeshiva and attend the classes. I'm not talking about commitment now. I'm not talking about pledging allegiance. I'm not even talking about believing in God, but I'm talking about experiencing a Shabbos, experiencing a holiday, I say, for men and for women, experiencing classical models of Jewish study, and they're different. Men study in yeshivas, women study in seminaries, and they should try it. Yes, it's very artificial. Why be all men and all women separately? Yes, try it. I know one incident that happened. Oh, but this I'm finished. A man was, a frum fellow was riding on a bus in Israel, and a non-religious fellow sat down next to him. And he noticed that the frum fellow had a book, and it had lots of numbers in it, and he was writing numbers. So this is Israel. So the non-religious fellow said, what are you doing? You don't have to introduce yourself. And we're all brothers under the skin. So he said, I'll tell you, I run a free loan society. We give out money without interest, and there's schedules of payments, and I'm just checking who's scheduled for a payment. The non-religious man said to him, I don't believe you. Nobody gives out money without interest. People don't do that. I said, look, you asked me, right? I'm telling you. What do you want from me? You want to see it? Come to my synagogue at such and such a time. We do this at a certain hour of the day. Come and you'll see. The guy came, and he saw them. People coming to pay, people coming to take out money, contracts being signed, he read the contracts, and there's no interest. He was floored. He was floored. So the frum fellow thought, this guy came and he saw, maybe I could build a bridge with him. He said, listen, I'm going to a chasana, a wedding. Why don't you and your wife come and see what a Jewish wedding is like? Of all the experiences for a non-religious person, a wedding is probably the most accessible. So he said, yes, I'll come. Gave him the invitation for where and what it was. Now, so this frum fellow said he posted someone at the door when they'll come to sort of greet them and usher them in. They come to the door. Obviously, by the way they're dressed, you could tell who they were. And they look in and they see a divider. All the men on this side and all the women on that side. A divide. They weren't prepared for that. So they're talking to each other, and they're turning around, they're going to leave. But the person who was posted at the door saw them, came over and said, oh, how nice of you to come. I hope you'll enjoy, I hope you'll join us and enjoy. You know, the man was taken to the man's side, the woman was taken to the woman's side. They had the time of their lives. They never dreamt that a wedding could be like that. Without getting drunk, without men dancing with other men's wives and so forth and so on. They never dreamt there could be that kind of joy. They learned something. That's a bridge. Some of what you need to learn is what it's like to experience life as a Jew, what it's like to live like a Jew. If you don't have that, all the lectures and all the books will be missing a crucial element, and you won't understand the lectures and the books either. So the two dimensions that I've been describing this afternoon are crucially intertwined with one another. A person has to go after both. Now, I know, saying this to you, I'm preaching to the choir, to the converted. You're here, and you're doing it. But there are 3 recordings here. And maybe, and you'll tell other people, that it's not enough to, from time to time, go to a website and read something. There's much more that needs to be done than that.